There are two big sort of UK myths that I think a lot of us in the UK really take to heart. And the first of all is that the NHS is always going to be there for us. No matter what, you know, favorability for the NHS is always incredibly high. Does it have its problems? Yes, absolutely. And we care about it. That's why stories about the NHS failing or doing bad or something when it goes wrong in the NHS always gains sort of national attention, even when sometimes the effect of it is not really national. It's just very sometimes just maybe even on a local level, maybe even only affecting a town or city, something which may normally only be maybe picked up in a local newspaper can suddenly become national news. That's how much we care about the NHS. And that's why we want to see it do well and be, surviving more than just surviving, but thriving and making sure that it is there for us when we need to use it. So that is something that is very sort of deeply ingrained into the British psyche, and that's a good thing. However, however, the other the other bad thing that is also very, very much ingrained on uh, the psyche of people in the UK is that housing prices will always go up. And unfortunately, this can lead to some very, very bad ways of thinking about housing, about how good housing is for like the social good of like local areas and cities and sort of public well-being, but also can cause huge problems as well down the line. And this is something we have to face. This is one of the great myths we really have to tackle head on, and it's not going to be easy. It is not something we can just, here's the magic bullet, housing crisis solved. It's not that easy, unfortunately. We wish it was sometimes, but when it comes to sort of politics and certainly policy, sometimes it's not always simple to do. So let's go cracking on into this because I think it is something well worth talking about. So before we do that, though, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And of course, there is the Patreon page and, of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So, if you'd like to support the channel that way. And there is the YouTube thank you button as well. And of course, don't forget to ring the bell so you get notifications about the channel as well when we drop a new video or when we go live. So, as always, thank you very much, everyone, for supporting the channel. Like I say, even if you do, just hit the like and share button. So, as always, let's crack on into this. So, housing. Always very much a interesting topic when you talk about housing, and it is something that everyone knows is a problem. We have been in a housing crisis for well over a decade, and I think one of the things that Labour should really, really focus on, especially at the next election, is really going in to why these haven't been why we are still in this crisis, and not only just highlight that it's not just a crisis, this is a housing disaster, and it has been one very, very much of the Tories' own making. Because we have seen the data, we have known that because of austerity, we have seen tons of local authorities not build social housing because they just have not had the budget to be able to do it. And as a result, you have, let me get the numbers up. So there is approximately 1.2 million households on local waiting lists just in England waiting for social housing. But it gets even worse because last year, the Observer discovered that over 40 local authorities just have neither either built nor even acquired any new social housing. So that is once again a lot of local authorities since 2010 that just have not built or even acquired any new social housing. But this is something that we should be looking at and solving. And it's not just a case of building new houses, it's also really a case of tackling landlords, because most of the houses that get bought, and this is a really sad statistic, but most houses now that get bought are not by the people who intend to live in them and make them their homes. They are instead bought by landlords, or who then go on to sort of rent them out or turn them into Airbnbs to essentially get round the hotel tax. This is again a big discussion where you see this of people who turn their properties into Airbnbs, where hotels have to pay a certain amount of tax. A Airbnb, which again technically a hotel, doesn't have to pay that tax. So something certainly we should be looking at. But remember, rents have also gone up. Just in about a year, just a year, rents in London are 16% higher. And in Greater Manchester, that figure is now 20% higher. And this is pushing us towards a lot of big problems. A lot of people are talking about there being a renting bubble, that rents increase in such a rate, in such a magnitude, that people just can't afford the rent, and all these sort of then empty properties then start floating around, because these are renting properties for people to rent, but there's no one can afford to rent them. So there's just a rent bubble potentially going to pop. You've then, of course, got the housing bubble as well. A lot of people have talked about that happening soon, that we are due for another housing crash sooner or later. A lot of people raising the alarm about that. And it gets even worse, because if you want to know just how much, or shall we say, how little um, social housing has really been built, this is a very sad statistic. So, housing between 2016 and 2021, this is across England. So sorry, it's between 2021 and 2022. So between a year, 2021 to 2022, around about 21,000 social homes were either sold or demolished. And I think that's a very bad statistic, because who are these sold to? Were they sold to the tenants? Were they sold to them? Were they able to sort of turn it into their home? If they were, great. But then demolished, again, what happened to these? Were they rebuilt? Did this end up becoming of what should be social homes but not built? One of the big things we've said is the government will have to take on um, the house building companies, because this is a traditional tactic of these house building companies will go forward, say we are going to build this massive social enterprise housing estate. The council goes, great, excellent, there's your planning permission. And the second they have the planning permission, they do not build those social housing. They change their mind completely at the last moment. And this is something that local councils, local authorities need more powers to be able to deal with developers who do that, to punish them, make them go, okay, well, now you've built all these non-social housing, but you told us you were going to build all these social housing. Well, now we're going to force you to sell them as social housing, even if that was not your intent in building them that way. We're going to force you to them. And that's the type of powers local councils really desperately need. And this, of course, goes into Labour, because I know people going, "Oh, Labour, they're just Tory light." Well, Lisa Nadley, who would be be in charge of housing, would be the housing secretary, has said she wants to empower councils to be able to do that, to give them more power to take on those house builders. Not only that, we are also seeing her talk about having a private renters charter. This is something that we have seen tried to pass in many local authorities that has ultimately failed, because again, there's either been the conservative on the local council has stood against it, and it's sort of failed. But having a national private renters council, private renters charter, to protect those private renters, to say this is the standard your flat should be in. If it's below that, then the landlord needs to do it. And there are nightmare stories of we've seen very recently. Not only just private landlords, but even social housing, which unfortunately was just not up to code. And We need to establish something like that desperately. And again, Tory light, no, that the Tories would never introduce a private renters charter, not in a month of Sundays. So once again, something that again a future Labour government is going to introduce, which will be good for all of the UK. So, pardon me. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.